Drones are everything in the war in Ukraine. That's been clear for years now, in a war that has been increasingly defined by which nation is able to create the best drone technology. Russia used to have the advantage in volume. That's gone. Russia never had the advantage in tech. Ukraine was always the innovator. And now, after 4.5 years of fighting, one thing has become abundantly clear. There is a master and a loser in the drone war. Russia is the loser. And if you have any doubts about that, or somehow still think that Russia is winning the drone war, then just watch what Ukraine is doing to them. On July 19th, an interesting clip surfaced on X, shared by Jay in Kyiv. The video shows us an interesting evolution in Ukraine's drone-based warfare that nobody expected to see. What that evolution is may not be clear on a first viewing. We see a Ukrainian drone carrying something on the end of a long wire. Could it be a bomb? A supply package? Neither would be war-changing, even if it's strange to see one of these things being dangled so far below a drone. It turns out it's neither. What dangles on the end of the wire is a Ukrainian ground robot, or UGV, that has been hoisted into the air by Ukraine's drone and is being carried, presumably to wherever Ukraine needs it to be to conduct an attack or serve a logistical purpose. In just 8 seconds of footage, we have witnessed true Ukrainian mastery at play. A heavy bomber drone has airlifted what Euromaidan press calls an explosive ground robot off the ground. The implications are massive. Bomber drones do what they say on the tin, drop bombs onto Russian positions. Explosive UGVs are a different prospect. They can still deliver as much, if not more, firepower than the bombs that are traditionally dropped, but they work differently. A UGV can be dropped onto the ground and then guided toward the intended target. A bomb that would have bounced off the hard surface of a Russian bunker has been replaced by a kamikaze UGV that can drive right into that bunker and blow it up from the inside. And here's what Putin's commanders don't want to think about as they try to come up with new ways to claim that Russia is somehow winning this war. If Ukraine can pull off this type of UGV operation once, it can do it again and again. Soon, the sight of explosive UGVs being carried over the battlefield, perhaps flanked by FPV drones that take aim at any Russian who emerges from cover to try to take the UGV down, will be commonplace all over Ukraine. And though we don't know the ultimate fate of the UGV in the footage, it being an explosive ground robot allows us to suggest what might have happened next. A Russian target was penetrated, then destroyed. There is precedent for Ukraine's use of UGVs in an attacking capacity. Ukraine hasn't always been subtle about it either. Back in January, soldiers from the country's 3rd Army Corps loaded a UGV with 12 mines, which the UGV carried over a distance of 20 kilometers before blowing up a Russian bunker. UGV combat operations have gotten a lot more sophisticated since then. In April, we saw Ukraine use ground robots to capture a Russian position, which President Volodymyr Zelensky hailed as a world-first operation. Another world first was pulled off in July when Ukraine used a maritime drone to transport a UGV onto the Kinburn Spit, leading to the UGV opening fire on a Russian position. And on July 17th, Forbes reported that Ukraine had pulled off another capture of a Russian infiltration site, using a combination of drones and robots to take out a Russian grouping near Dobropilya. The combat possibilities for this evolution in Ukraine's drone strategy are immense. Imagine a small fleet of UAVs, each carrying robots to serve different purposes. The kamikaze UGVs are dropped first. Flanked by FPV drones, they roll into Russian positions and detonate. Behind them are other combat UGVs, armed with heavy machine guns that fire on the ruined positions and blare messages from loudspeakers, telling the occupiers that they need to surrender or die. If needed, other ground robots carrying supplies can be flown into the fray to support Ukrainian troops on the ground. All of this is possible now that Ukraine seems to have figured out how to airlift its UGVs. This is true mastery. Ukraine has made drone warfare an art form. However, what we see here is just a microcosm of a reality that Russia has been forced to face for far too long now. Both sides have drones, but when it comes to who is best at using them and who is able to innovate strategies that the other side simply never sees coming, Ukraine comes out on top every single time. And what we're seeing on the ground and in the air delivers the same message over and over. Anybody who thinks Russia is winning the drone race is wrong. Ukraine is on top, and it has been for most of 2026. Let's stick with the UGVs for a moment. The evolution of UGVs, both in terms of their design and their myriad uses in the Ukraine war, has been remarkable. This technology used to be almost purely logistical. Many ground robots still serve this type of purpose, as they make supply runs along the front in place of soldiers and are even used to evacuate troops, driving them back to safety behind the front lines. However, we have also seen UGVs increasingly used in a combat capacity. UGVs are now being loaded with machine guns, allowing them to fire on positions, and bombs that they can use to blow those positions sky high. Some UGVs even have thermal night vision, allowing for operations in the dark, Euromaidan press reports. The kamikaze UGVs that we're now seeing emerge on the battlefield can even do something that Ukraine's UAVs can't do: drive straight into an open bunker or up to a piece of equipment and detonate. Ukraine recognizes that UGVs are a potential game changer, and it's investing heavily in getting as many of them onto the battlefield as possible. RBC Ukraine reports that Ukraine built 25,000 UGVs during the first half of 2026. Assuming the same production schedule for the second half of the year, and there's every chance that Ukraine will try to build even more, that will mean 50,000 UGVs built and on the battlefield by the end of the year. Ukraine's commanders have taken to calling these ground robots the new cavalry, because they can complete missions that would have previously required risking Ukrainian lives. And for a little extra context, Ukraine built 15,000 UGVs in 2025. The 2026 numbers could end up being more than 3 times higher. Beyond building them, Ukraine is using UGVs a lot. In June, these ground robots combined to carry out a record-breaking 16,676 missions, and they surpassed 65,000 missions in total by the end of the month. We've seen the number of monthly missions UGVs complete more than double from the 7,495 in January to what we see today, which is simply remarkable. This technology barely even existed a couple of years ago. Now Ukraine has not only mastered it, but it's making its UGV advantage pay on the battlefield. Russia is trying to keep up, of course. That's the point. Ukraine is the innovator and Russia is the copycat. A May 1st Pravda report says that Russia now has at least 20 different types of UGV of its own. However, Russia hasn't deployed robots like these at anywhere near the scale that Ukraine has, and it's certainly not using them to capture positions or airlifting them onto the field using drones. That's all Ukrainian innovation. Plus, Russia faces the problem of sanctions, as 10 of the 20 identified companies making Russian ground drones are under US sanctions, with several also being under Ukrainian and European Union sanctions. More sanctions pressure placed on the manufacturers of Russian ground robots would help Ukraine extend an already healthy lead into an unbeatable one. But enough about UGVs. As important as they are, we told you that Ukraine has become the master across the entire drone war, not just one aspect of it. We weren't lying. Another area where Ukraine has leapt ahead is in long-range strikes, and a recent attack carried out by Ukraine shows us plenty. Before we get to that, a quick side note: you are watching The Military Show. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now's the perfect time to hit that button and ring the notification bell so you are among the first to see our daily videos. We take you to a massive strike that Ukraine conducted overnight leading into July 21st. Ukraine chose that date to send around 350 strike drones into Russia and the occupied territories, including carrying out several strikes in the Black Sea. Fires broke out all over. Occupied Mariupol was struck hard, leading to smoke rising over the city. Ukraine likely hit a fuel or oil depot there. A logistics center in Crimea was taken out, as were some large industrial sites in Lipetsk, including one that was either near or is a steel plant that is responsible for producing about 20% of Russia's steel and lipids. More ships were struck in the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov, and Ukraine also destroyed radars, logistical depots, and more in the occupied regions of Donetsk, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia. Oh, and there was also a massive strike against the Kalino air base in Russia's Kursk region, which destroyed an Su-24 fighter jet and a Pantsir S-1 air defense system. All of this is very impressive, of course, but it's not the real story when it comes to Ukraine's deep strikes. What was most remarkable about this day of drone destruction is that Russia also launched its own long-range attack during the same period, and Russia lost badly. By the end of the strikes, Ukraine had unleashed around 6 times the number of long-range drones that Russia had. Russia only managed 58 drones and missiles in the face of Ukraine's long-range blitz. That matters in the context of Ukraine's growing drone mastery for a simple reason. One of the only drone advantages that Russia had has slipped away. For years, Russia has been able to launch much larger swarms of long-range drones than Ukraine could manage in response. Everything has changed in 2026. Ukraine has now reached parity, at the very least, on the deep strike front. As we saw on July 21st, it's often launching more long-range drones than Russia. This 6-to-1 strike isn't an isolated incident. Ukraine coming out on top in the deep strike game is becoming a regular occurrence. A daily one, in fact. Ukraine sending 350 drones into Russia and the occupied territories isn't some sort of new record, not even close. As President Volodymyr Zelensky revealed in June, 300 to 350 strike drones are now the average that Ukraine launches every single day, as the nation has massively ramped up its deep strike campaign to destroy Russian oil, cripple military bases, and break the Russian war machine from the inside. Now, we don't want to give the impression that Ukraine always launches more drones than Russia. That's why we mentioned parity. Some days Russia launches more, other days it's Ukraine. But the fact that Ukraine has reached this volume at all, especially when combined with the precise nature of its strikes compared to Russia simply trying to hit anything, and often targeting cities, means that Ukraine is coming out on top. Russia should have seen this turnaround coming from the start of the year. The first 4 days of 2026 saw Ukraine launch more drones at Russia than Russia launched at Ukraine. Ukraine has also been busy breaking long-range records. On the night of June 17th and into June 18th, Russia's air defenses claimed to have shot down 992 of Ukraine's drones during an overnight attack. That came on the back of a June 6th strike where Russia claimed to have shot down 911 drones. These numbers are insane. Ukraine was never supposed to reach them, but it has, and we're starting to see how Ukraine pulling ahead on the long-range front is forcing Russia to change its military calculus. A couple of years ago, Russia could feel relatively safe, hundreds of kilometers behind the front. Ukraine couldn't strike targets inside Russia, at least not with any sort of regularity. But again, everything has changed. Ukraine's drones can now strike in greater volume, accurately, and at previously unthinkable ranges. In fact, range is another key point. July 7th saw Ukraine conduct a drone attack against the Omsk refinery. To do that, Ukraine's drones had to travel at least 2,500 kilometers. And that sort of range tells Russia that nothing it tries to hide away on its own territory is safe anymore. Russia is finding itself unable to intercept these attacks. Sure, the defense ministry tends to claim perfect interception records, but the same ministry will also tell you that it's drone debris that just so happens to be scoring direct hits on the targets that Ukraine wanted to strike, and not the drones themselves. When it comes to calculus, Russia has to either accept the fact that everything within at least a 2,500-kilometer range of Ukraine is now a target, or it has to invest heavily in new defenses to protect anything behind the front. And that investment won't keep pace. It's not exactly easy to build new air defenses when you're dealing with sanctions and a cash crunch following 4 years of immense military spending. So Ukraine leads Russia on ground drones and is starting to pull ahead on the long-range front. Speaking of the front, we're seeing something similar there. According to the former commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Alexander Syrskyi, Ukraine has a 1.5 to 1 FPV drone advantage over Russia across most of the front line. That interesting tidbit of news came at the same time that he announced how Ukraine's drone operators had carried out strikes against 180,000 verified targets in May alone. The sheer scale of this strike ratio is immense, and the fact that Ukraine now holds the FPV lead shows us how replacing soldiers with drones has become a key part of its strategy. We see that in the production numbers too. In July, Ukraine confirmed that it will build around 10 million drones in 2026, and that it has the production capacity needed to double that number if it gets the funding required to do so. That funding is coming. Ukraine has signed a huge $1.1 billion drone deal with the European Union, which goes onto the pile of other drone deals that it's been signing with individual nations. A 20-country cooperation model is also being built for drone production, Zelensky says, which will help Ukraine pull even further ahead. Ukraine has also pulled ahead on the Interceptor drone front. While Russia still primarily relies on air defense systems that were designed to tackle missiles and aircraft to take down drones, Ukraine has built a new generation of Interceptor drones. Cost and effectiveness are key here. Interceptors can take out Shahid-type attack drones costing around $50,000 each for a fraction of the cost. For instance, a single Sting Interceptor costs Ukraine $2,500 to build. What we have here is Ukraine building more and better drones for its frontline forces while it invests intelligently into cheap drones in the rear that mitigate the threat posed by Russia's long-range campaign. Again, it's that word innovation. Ukraine is innovative, Russia isn't. That's why one is the master of drone warfare and the other is a loser who can do little more than copy. And before we wrap up, we have one more aspect of the drone war to cover: mid-range strikes. 2026 has seen the rise of a new generation of mid-range strike drones that allows Ukraine to carry out attacks in the occupied regions that it couldn't carry out before. FPV drones couldn't travel far enough, and long-range drones were needed to attack Russia. What Ukraine now has are drones that can strike in the 50 to 200 kilometer range, which it can use to wreck Russian logistics and destroy key assets such as command posts, ammo depots, and troop gathering points. Russia's supply routes in the near rear have now become a hunting ground for these mid-range strike drones, many of which are infused with artificial intelligence that allows them to automatically detect and track targets before they get the okay to strike. That's another arena where Ukraine comes out on top. Both sides use AI, but Ukraine does so much more effectively. Ukraine has been using these drones to attack Russian convoys, be they of armored vehicles or fuel and supply trucks attempting to transport their cargo to the front. Ukraine has announced a $113 million logistics lockdown campaign to support these efforts, and Russian vehicles are burning by the hundreds. Crimea has felt the worst of the impact. Increasingly isolated, the peninsula is experiencing massive fuel shortages and constant blackouts. The latter caused by mid-range strikes against power stations and substations. On the front, soldiers who are relying on fuel, ammunition, food and supplies constantly find that none arrives, as yet another truck gets blown up, or a bridge is collapsed, a logistics hub is ruined, or a road is reduced to rubble. Alone, these strikes would still be important, but when combined with Ukraine's FPV advantage on the front, the increasing scale of Ukraine's deep strikes, thousands of ground robots saving lives and carrying out combat missions, and the innovative mindset that has led to Ukraine coming up with a new way to bring those ground robots into battle, you get a recipe for a Russian disaster. Russia thought it was good at war, so good that it could use Soviet-era tactics to destroy Ukraine. When that failed and the stream of Western support allowed Ukraine to survive the early months and years of the invasion, the momentum of the war started to shift. Now we see the turnaround. Russia is playing catch-up while still relying on strategies that involve sacrificing soldiers to make progress. Ukraine builds more and better drones, and it's transformed the face of war in the process. Ukraine is the master of the universe of drones, and we haven't even covered one of the key types of drones that has given the nation that distinction: maritime drones. Yes, Ukraine leads the way in this area of drone warfare too, and if you need any proof of that, we have the perfect video waiting in the wings. Ukraine has unleashed Moby Dick, which is a new type of maritime drone platform with a huge range, multiple variants, and enough stopping power for almost any type of naval mission. Find out more by watching our analysis. But before you do, remember to subscribe to The Military Show. We publish videos like this daily, and we'd love to have you along for the ride. And thank you for watching.